So why did one of my Etsy brands already see over $35,000 months after only 6 months, while another Etsy brand of mine wasn't even breaking 10K months after 6 months? After doing some serious analyzing of some of the key components of why this is, I wanted to break them down for you in this video. Hopes for this video is that hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to gauge for yourself why you may or may not be making the sales that you want with your own Etsy brand. So without further ado, let's get into this video. Welcome back, guys. To start this video off, just to set things straight from the get-go of this video, I personally don't share intellectual property about my own brands, because if you have ever built an Etsy store and dedicated thousands of hours to building a business, when you come here on YouTube and you share your success is one thing, but then to share your intellectual property, you kind of open the floodgates for people to steal your images, steal your designs, your copywriting, basically everything that you've built. So I do try to preserve the brands that I built for obvious reasons. At this point, you've spent thousands of hours on your store like I have, then I'm sure you can understand and respect that. But without further ado, let's hop into this and showcase some numbers here. So as you can see on my first brand here, basically we started here, you can see at the end of July, and then we started gaining momentum pretty fast. So I'm counting the first 6 months, not in July. I'm starting in August basically, because that's when we actually started seeing some real sales volume. So basically August, September, October, November, and December, that's 5 months. That's about $28,000, $557 in my 5th month. And then if we switch over here to 2020, you'll see that in that 6th month, we did over $36,000. Now, if you compare that to my second brand that started in 2020, so more towards the end of 2020, you can see really in October, we are building really small months and actually going down in December. And then we go into the first 3 months of 2021, and you see that in that 6th month, we only did $6,100. So what are some key elements of why my first brand did such bigger numbers than my second brand? Basically, as I was doing this analysis, I came up with about basically 4 key elements of why that first brand just super excelled compared to the second brand. The first key element is the search volume that was associated with that niche with that first brand. Just to explain a little bit further here, you are allowed to have more than one Etsy brand. They just can't be selling the same item. So these 2 brands were in completely different niches, had completely different customer avatars. They both had their own set of individual problems with materials and quality control issues, so on and so forth. Now, one thing that you have to understand is the amount of volume that you get to your Etsy shop is contingent on the amount of searches per month for that category or that niche. Now, different niches or different categories have different amount of search volume. And by default, my first brand was just so happened to be in a category that had a lot of search volume for the products that I was selling. Whereas my second brand was such a specific customer avatar that the search volume just wasn't there in comparison to the first brand. Now, one way that you can actually check this for yourself, and actually this is one of the tools that I use to check search volume for all of my listings when I'm making my listings, is when you come into Etsy, you can use a tool called Sales Samurai. And Sales Samurai is my competitor analysis tool, it's my keyword research tool, it's my listing optimization tool. It literally does everything. But for instance, for this case scenario, if you're just trying to understand why you're not getting a bunch of volume to your store, like every month you're not getting thousands of views and thousands of clicks, the reason being might be because there's just not a big enough search volume for the products that you actually want to sell. And the more niche your products are, then the less search volume there's going to be. And there's pros to cons to that. in itself, which we'll talk about here in a second. But for instance here, so if I come into Sales Samurai here and I type in the keyword gold necklace, right? And I'm using their basic search tool here, right? And I put in the keyword gold necklace, it's gonna throw back to me the amount of search volume that it has. So this word has a 26,000 monthly search volume. Compare that to, if I come in here and type in bird feeder, you see the average monthly search volume is only 3,300, right? Whereas gold necklace was 26,000. So if your shop is only selling bird feeders, which a bird feeder is probably the biggest or the broadest key term that you have, obviously you could go even more niche like wooden bird feeder or personalized bird feeder, so on and so forth, right? Bird feeder is probably the biggest keyword that's available to you for that type of store, right? 3,000 search volume is a good amount of search volume for a product, but when you look at the store in its entirety, you may not make the volume of sales that you might make if you're selling something like gold necklace, where you just have so much more search volume available to you. Now, yes, when it comes to search volume, the higher the search volume usually tends to mean higher the competition, but I'm usually not too worried about the competition because what I preach and what I teach is that you're building competitive listings and competitive products and analyzing the marketplace properly before you go to market, so you know that when you launch your listings for the first time, you're building listings that are going to compete with people who are directly at the top, which Sales Samurai can also find those types of analytics for you. So I can come down here and actually see what listing has the keyword bird feeder in it and what type of listing that actually is. So if I click on this guy here, we already know it's one of the best-selling bird feeders out there since it's in 20 plus people carts. Now, this listing has only one picture and it's not super optimized. So actually that means that that's really a good opportunity if someone wanted to sell bird feeders, considering this is a bestseller, it's got a good price point, it's in 20 people's carts, and it only has one image. That's actually some really good data. Thanks, Sales Samurai. Just to let you guys know, Sales Samurai is actually doing a giveaway right now where they're giving away 3 full year subscription plans away for free. So if you're interested in getting a free yearly subscription with Sales Samurai, make sure you check out that link in my description. This raffle is ending exactly 10 days from now, so make sure you are signing up today so that you can win that free yearly subscription. Now let's move on to the second key component of why my first brand really overshadowed my second brand. And the reason being is because of the number of listings that I had. With my first brand, I think we had already over 300 listings within that first 6 months, whereas the second brand only had about 70 listings after 6 months. The number of listings you have isn't a guarantee that you're gonna make more sales, especially if the quality of the listings isn't that great. But one way that you can check that, and one way that you can check to see what you should personally aim for in your own store, is based off doing some competitor analysis. I'm gonna pull Sales Samurai back up here, and I'm gonna use the competitor tracking tool. And what this is like when you put in an Etsy shop name, you can actually go ahead and track your top competitors' shops. Now, what is important to look at here, right? So as I mentioned before, the number of listings could potentially be a key element for your own store. Why not you're seeing the sales momentum that you want. Certain niches are very, very much contingent on the amount of listings you have because it's such a horizontal scaling niche. Now, this is not true for all of your niches, but in my case particularly, even though there are 2 different niches, it was super helpful that I had so many more listings and so many more variations with my first store than say my second store. So what I always suggest you do is make sure that you go out and find, before you really dive deep into building out your Etsy store, go out and find 3 to 5 of your top Etsy competitors, stick them in here in your Sales Samurai, and analyze not only the people that have the most sales, but also the most sales in a certain amount of time. And I want you to notice how many listings those sellers have. So for instance here, we have a store that was opened 5 years ago. They don't have that many more listings than this guy that opened 8 years ago, but if you see, they have more than double the amount of sales of this guy. So this guy is younger, has only a few more listings, but has done over twice the amount of sales. So I would want to go ahead and analyze this top guy here and see what they're specifically doing in their listings. So not only how many listings they have, because that's what I want to aim for, but also what type of quality and what type of price point and what type of value propositions they have going on with their listings, because that's going to be the guy that I want to emulate. And I want to keep in mind that they have 183 listings, and I'm going to want to get to the later hundreds of listings eventually and make that a goal. Now this leads me to my third component, key component or key variable of why my first brand probably saw such an influx of sales versus my second brand. And that is the amount that I was allowed to spend on Etsy paid traffic. So as you know, in your Etsy account, Etsy lets you set a daily budget for your Etsy listings. When you start your Etsy shop for the first time, Etsy sets you a max budget allowance. So it starts off usually at like $25 a day, where you're actually not allowed to set your max budget allowance more than $25. And over time, as you show Etsy that you're willing to spend, Etsy will slowly increase that budget to $50, $100, $500, and then whatever increments they set it for you, that's what it is. It may be different for everybody. And so personally, I've never seen an Etsy account be allowed to spend more than $1,000 a day. Now, my point with this is that with my first brand, which I believe this is because maybe the search volume was just higher, they allowed me to get to the max budget allowance of $1,000 a day within the first 90 days, meaning within 3 months, I was allowed to set my budget to $1,000 a day. Now, if you look at my second brand, I wasn't even allowed to get to $1,000 a day spending until about 9 months into the store opening. So I wasn't even allowed to get my max budget allowance to that 1K a day spending until really almost a year. And even when I would set it to the $1,000 a day, it would only spend maybe $50 to $100 out of that $1,000. But the reason why this is so important is because even though, like today, if you have your max budget allowance at $500 and only spends $20, what it does when you do set it to your max budget allowance, it shows Etsy that you're willing to outbid your competitors and that you're willing to spend the max budget allowance. Maybe for some niches it does, but at least for these two niches, it would not. The big brand setting it to $1,000 a day spending, at its most, it may have spent $400 or $500 in a single day. And I really think that's what it propelled me, especially in comparison to my competition. Whereas my second brand, one, we weren't allowed to spend a lot of money, and two, the search volume was a lot lower. Optimization and the indexation of my listings was just such a long and slow process. Even now, fast forward to 2022, I still think that our biggest month so far has only been, looks like it was in November of 2022 at around $28,630, which I can't complain at all. Like it's taken a lot longer to really increase our sales. And finally, number 4 is because of how competitive my listings were. So with my first brand, we used the art of bundling out of the gates. And if you don't know what bundling is, I have more videos on how to bundle your items and the psychology of why that makes your listings so much more competitive. And so out of the gates, I did that with my first brand, whereas my second brand, I don't know, I just didn't pay that much attention to it. It does require a lot more work on the back end for me, so I didn't really bundle my items as well as I should until really 2022. We started bundling things on all of our listings, and essentially that is what's changed the game for our store. Bundling your items really does a lot of things. It increases your average order value, it helps your Etsy SEO because essentially Etsy sees that you're getting a high order value. It also gets you a higher CTR, which stands for click-through rate. It does a whole bunch of things for your listings. Again, if you want to watch that full video, I'll link it above. But yeah, like I mentioned before, we didn't really start doing that seriously until 2022, which is why we're finally getting over 20K months. But obviously the goal with the second brand is we want to be up where the first brand is, doing the 50, 60, 70, 80, even over 100K months with that brand. But it's just going to take a lot more time and a lot more work. But guys, overall, I hope that this video gave you some perspective and understanding the correct perspective that you need to have so you're not getting disappointed if you're only 60 days in and you're not making $1,000 a day yet, because it's probably more normal than you think, and there's just more time needed or more work that needs to be done. Guys, I hope you got some value out of this video. Again, if you want to check out Sales Samurai and get into that giveaway, make sure you click the link in the description, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.